Hello and welcome to another art house movie review. This time I'm reviewing the film The Beasts, directed by Rodrigo Sorogoyen. So this film has the most amazing opening scenes. The first kind of 9 or 10 minutes I just found incredible. It's basically made up of two scenes. So the opening scene is a scene of two men subduing a horse from a group of horses, and it appears very brutal and violent, but it ends in a kind of intimate embrace between the two men and the horse. Almost the three of them are kind of joined. It's kind of violent, but it's got something beautiful about it as well. And the drama of this scene is really emphasized by fantastic music. I just thought this was such a great opening to the film. And then we go to a second scene, which is set in a bar where we've got a group of the men sitting round talking. And it appears they're having just a somewhat trivial conversation, but we just learn so much from this conversation. It's so well done. We basically get a lot of the premise of the story and an indication of who the characters are. But it's not just giving us information, it's really compelling dialogue. And I'm always impressed when dialogue is just engaging in a film. I never quite understand how it works, but I know it when I see it. It's so naturalistic and authentic. It doesn't feel scripted, and it really pulls you in. It must be a combination of great writing, great directing, and fantastic acting. And I just thought that this was a great structure for the start of a film. We had this dramatic, violent, rather beautiful, poetic opening scene. And then we go to this really still, almost trivial scene of people sitting around talking. But as I say, it just works so well. For me, this is just like a masterclass in filmmaking. I really wanted to see this film, and I was just hooked. The lighting in that second scene is exquisite. There's no lighting in the room, so the room is dark. So some of the faces are in the dark, but light is coming in from the window, and probably the sun's going down, and there's just the most beautiful light on the faces, as some are half lit and some are fully lit, and it just adds to the scene. I was just so impressed by this filmmaking. So I think this is a film about racism, but I also think it's a film about class, and a kind of clash between people who are living their dream and people who've been left behind. And there's a clash here between small town ignorance and middle class arrogance, knowing best. And in some ways, from a UK perspective, there are lots of parallels with the Brexit issue. And this film is about racism, it's about fear, it's about selfishness, and it's about financial insecurity. And there's a really interesting question as to who the beasts are, because obviously the film starts with the horses and their beasts, but then there is an ambiguity between the villagers and possibly the beasts, but from the villagers' perspective, it's the French couple that are the beasts. And indeed, at one point, the French couple's daughter actually says to the mum, "You're the hillbillies." And I really like this ambiguity. Although there are some clearly bad things that happen in this film, there is a question mark over who's in the right and who's in the wrong. And the film really brings out the question of, does someone born and bred in a place have more rights than someone who moves into that place later and makes it their home? Because these are the key issues with immigration and racism. The existing population feeling that they have rights which the incoming population can never obtain. There's a really interesting scene when the two main characters stop to communicate their feelings to each other in the bar, and they do rationally explain where each of them is coming from, and it makes sense. They're both kind of rational points of view, but you realise during this conversation that they're just never going to find common ground. They're never going to understand each other's position, and there is no compromise. And I don't think the film was coming down on either side of the issue. It certainly wasn't trying to justify a kind of anti-immigration stance, but I think it did at several points in the film just make you reflect that people who are racist and anti-immigration do have fears and concerns, even if they're not real or only perceived. Now, and this is the big spoiler if you haven't seen the film, the death completely changed the film for me, because the dynamics of the clash between these two main characters are really what made the film so engaging. So when one of the characters is no longer there, the film completely changed. It was never going to be the same from that point. And at the end of the day, this is a really good thriller. Right up until the end, you want to know what's going to happen. I did feel that it just slightly lost something. It's definitely the case that the wife had a completely different way of approaching the issue than the man did, but somehow I just didn't feel that her character was as well developed, and so I did just feel something was lost. But actually, all that said, it was still really interesting. Her relationship with her daughter, her relationship with the police, the way that she tried to deal with it, the way that she actually does help to solve the crime in the end. I'm not really complaining. I loved this film. I've been thinking about it a lot since seeing it, and there are so many possible interpretations and understandings of it, even so far as that the film is actually a kind of metaphor for wars between nation states. This idea of two sides talking to each other and just not being able to hear what the other side wants, not being able to find any middle ground. This clearly has resonance beyond this small Spanish village. It was really interesting because I had a whole series of emotions in this film. Obviously, at the beginning, you're on the side of the French couple, but then as you get to understand the position of the locals more, I found myself having more sympathy with them. And some of the locals are really nice, of course, but a couple of them are really not nice. And so in the end, it's hard to have much sympathy for them. As I say, this film is a great thriller. There's tension all the way through it. This is both in terms of the story, but then this is really reinforced by a great soundtrack. Overall, I thought this film was really well made. As I say, a kind of masterclass in filmmaking at times, but it was also a great thriller, great story, great tension. I highly recommend this film. Thanks for watching. See you next time.